We don't make enough. It's not fair. I can't afford the house of my dreams. That's not fair. I pay more than my competitors pay. That's not fair. We only just started to make a profit. It's not fair for me to pay my workers more. Those guys over there get paid more than we do. That's not fair. Companies without unions don't have to follow the same work rules. That's not fair. Welcome back to another episode of the Labor Relations Roundup. I'm Gareth Dunn. I'm going to try and talk us through what it means to be fair in the labor relations world, how that's used, how that can be a significant bargaining strategy. The issue of fairness is huge today, especially with inflation the way it is. So let's dive right in. So when I started thinking about this video, I was like, well, what is fair? What's the definition? So I grabbed what I thought was probably the best definition for a labor relations sense, and here it is. Fairness is marked by impartiality and honesty, free from self-interest, prejudice, or favoritism. Now let's be honest, in terms of labor relations, nobody is free from self-interest. Everyone is serving themselves. Employers are doing what they can, unions are doing what they can. That is the purpose of labor relations, and that's the balance we play within. I'm going to be putting these concepts pretty crudely, so I mean no offense to either side of this equation. The self-interest from the business side of things is all about maximizing profits. So in order to keep expenses low, it's in the business's best interest, within reason, to pay as little as possible. From the unions or the employee side of things, it's in their best interest to make as much money as possible for as little work as possible, crudely speaking. An additional interest for an employer would be to pay enough money and give a really good remuneration package in order to keep and retain the top talent. There's a self-interest in that as well. From the employee side, making an employer responsible for your pension, your healthcare, your benefits, your family's benefits, death benefits, all of these other things is obviously in the employee or the union's self-interest when they're coming to determine what is fair. So why do we care about fairness? You see, the word fairness triggers something in us that says if something is unfair, someone is the victim of someone else's actions. So it would be impossible to talk about fairness without talking about a victim. There's a persecutor and there's a victim. The employer doesn't pay enough for us to live. They are persecuting us, we are the victims. The employer says, I cannot compete because my union wages are too high. The employer is the victim, and the union is the persecutor. So we need to understand those concepts of victim mentality, or however you want to describe that, someone who's getting the raw end of the deal. In order to balance that, that's the place where we like to play with the word fair. In terms of social dynamics, we have become very conditioned to side with the victim. It's why media strategies from anyone, from governments, from businesses, from unions, whatever, will always include something along the lines of someone has done something and therefore you should side with me. There are a ton of psychological and marketing papers written on the subject of creating this whole dynamic around fairness. I don't want to get into that today. I'm not qualified to get into that today. What I do want to show you is how it's currently being used in an effort to strategize for bargaining from both sides of the equation. So I'm going to take you through two very current issues where the media is being used in a labor dispute type setting. So here we go. This one comes from an article by Nunatsiaq News in Nunavut. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Let's just say the workers in the union, when they were presented with the last offer from their employer, were having none of it. The title of the article is Nunavut Employees Union Should Share Its Idea of Fair Wages. It then opens the article with unionized housing workers went on strike Friday over wages but haven't publicly said how much they're after. Now, a very real strategy in bargaining is to not ask for exactly what you want. We actually do this all the time. We do it with our partners, we do it in relationships, we do it all over the place. But in bargaining, if you ask directly for what you want, it's possible that you could have got something better than what you're asking for. So there is definitely a strategy to not putting what your idea of fair is on the table in case the other side says, well, okay, fine, we think this is fair, and they give you double what you thought you were going to get in the first place. The other issue in this article that's sticking out to me is that the union could be asking for something that's so ridiculous that they don't want to disclose it to the public because of fear of what that is going to do to the image of what they're asking for and the credibility of their campaign. So that could be a huge deterrent. Once you lose that public interest in your cause, obviously striking is about bringing awareness and attention. Like that's why you strike. That's why you form a picket line. You bring attention to your cause in order to help people think that you are the victim of someone else. So if the public looks at it and goes, well, they're asking for 10% wage increases, that's ridiculous. We don't see that as fair. They've kind of lost a lot of steam there. So that could be a strategy the union's trying to employ in this case. The employer in this case is the Iqaluit. I'm sorry, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Housing Authority. And I have no idea if they went to the media to say, hey, listen, this is what's happening. This is what we've offered. It seems by the article that the journalist knows how much the employer had put on the table. So it's very possible that the employer is talking to media and the union has decided not to. I think in this case, the employer has done an incredible job of putting something on the table. Like their wage increases are not huge. It's pretty standard, 1.25, 1.5. But the union's put nothing to the media. So the public is only getting one side of what's going on there. And the employer is controlling the narrative. So even the title of this journalism piece already questions the credibility of what the union is doing, and the employer is seen to be being upfront, which is a great strategy for creating a position where, well, who's the victim now? It seems like the union needs to do something, and that's fairly good strategy. Now let's look at the second piece here. So what happened was on Friday, the union declared strike. By Monday, I think it is, the employer has said, well, actually, we're locking you out. So there's certain reasons why employers will do that. I've talked about it in my What is Labor Relations video. But it's basically where the employer takes control. They lock out workers and they have some further control as to what's going on. But also you're playing with public image. Often a lockout is seen as an aggressive move by an employer. But that's what they've chosen to do since the first article I referenced. Now, I wanted to just put on the table something the employer has said. What they've said is that the Housing Authority remains willing and prepared to negotiate a fair settlement as soon as possible. But it is determined that a lockout is a necessary step to ensure that services are maintained on a consistent basis during this labor dispute. The union, as of today, continues to not state what they are looking for. In my opinion, the employer is winning the fair strategy here. The union at this point is going to start feeling the heat that they are preventing these people in the housing authority, the clients or the people they provide service to, at a disadvantage because they're not servicing. And thus, it's my opinion that the employer will look to be the most fair under these circumstances. They are dealing with the issue. They've taken it under control. They've issued the lockout. They've accepted essential services, which, the things that you just cannot let go, like the heating of the building. So I think in the public's eye, from these articles, the employer's done an incredible job of managing the story. I'd like to take you to another case, and this one is here in the Fraser Valley in BC. It has to do with the handy-dot bus drivers in the Fraser Valley region. Now, the Fraser Valley is sort of the outskirts of Metro Vancouver. It's by most rights a cheaper place to live than in Metro Vancouver. It's important that I said that because that's often an employer's strategy when looking at what to give in terms of raises when someone wants to compare themselves to someone in Vancouver or in a major city hub where obviously cost of living and all those other things are much higher. But without further ado, let me show you what I want to show you. So according to this article, the union is looking for a 32% increase in pay to align these workers with the Metro Vancouver bus drivers. Obviously, 32% is a huge number. The article is not clear on how long the union is seeking for that 32% gap to be made up. It could be 3 years, it could be 5 years. I could be first year, I have no clue. But regardless, a 32% increase in pay to get them to Metro Vancouver is a huge leap. This has now become a strike issue, so people are not getting picked up. They can't take the handy dart services, besides for people who are going to essential medical treatments. So cancer patients and that going for dialysis or whatever that chemo or whatever they have to do. They are still being picked up, but anyone going to school, anything like that, using handy dart services, has to find their own way. Let's look at who the victims are. So the first piece is the workers. They obviously are feeling undervalued. It's not a fair deal for them because they don't make what other bus drivers make in Metro Vancouver. In the article, I'll reference a piece here from the union, which says, what's happened over the years is that the employer has taken advantage of our members' desire not to impact the public. And so the result of that is where we are at now. The second victim in the story is obviously the students and everyone else who can no longer use services. So obviously an Uber is 10 times the price of a bus. So obviously they are some fairly big victims in this circumstance, which is important to know when we're looking at a strategy for bargaining, a media strategy, a public relations strategy for both sides of the coin there. I want to dissect this a little bit. So the union is saying that the employer has taken advantage of these workers. So why is the union saying that? Well, they're saying that to cause the public to think that these employees are victims, that the big bad employer has punished them. But if we look a little bit deeper, whose fault is it really? The union's job is to negotiate for employees. They're basically saying they've done a bad job. Now, the Fraser Valley actually covers a lot of different areas, and probably each of these areas have quite a vastly different cost of living associated to them. A strategy for the employer could say, well, okay, fine. This area is more expensive to live in. The drivers that drive in this area, we'll give them 5%. This area is cheaper to live in, we'll give them 2%. This sort of clashes with the union's basic ideology of equal work for equal pay, which is essentially what they're trying to get at, well, if you can drive in Metro Vancouver and you can drive in the Fraser Valley, the equivalent is the same. You're both driving a bus, you should be paid the same. And the employer is saying, well, no, there's a completely different cost of living, a different whole situation out here, which is funny because when they go to negotiate Metro Vancouver, the union could take the position, well, there's a way higher cost of living in Vancouver, and therefore these guys need to make more than the guys in the Fraser Valley. Either it's our cost of living is higher, or we do the same job. But at the end of the day, in some way it's not fair, but the way just moves all the time, depending on which group you're negotiating with. We know that 32% is the gap between Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley, at least according to this article. So knowing that it's cheaper to live outside of Metro Vancouver, where is the fair deal? That's the real question. Is it at 16%? Is it at 28%? Is it at 10%? Is it at 5%? Like, what is fair? And that's the question we're coming up against. It's all in the perception. There's no real right or wrong when it comes to fair. It's how people feel about the deal. It's situations like this that you'll often hear labor relations people say, a fair deal is when both sides are equally pissed off about it, which just seems like such a sad way to look at things. But there's some truth to it. There's, I've given something, I got something on both sides. And hopefully you're not all disgruntled, the employer and the union and the employees, and everyone's just disgruntled about things. And hopefully, you can work to a fair solution, but you're really dealing with an opinion of what fair is. And that's one of the hardest uphill challenges of any labor relations job. In terms of getting to the point of no return, the strike, the lockout, the chaos that creates, it's all a lose-lose situation. Workers stop getting paid, employers stop being able to charge, the public stops access to service. It's all just a lose-lose. I always encourage people, like, everyone loses in this situation. Find a way to take a little, to give a little, and come to a deal where everyone can feel comfortable in the deal. Nobody wins everything. This isn't the lottery. But that's all today, and thanks for watching once again. If you liked it, please subscribe, comment, tell me what I can do better. I'm trying not to read off a teleprompter anymore. I got a lot of criticism from my creative friends, which is fair. I understand that. So I'm trying to bring my natural self to this whole YouTube channel, and I hope it's coming off that way. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.